Hello everybody, welcome to another, I don't know if this counts as a trip report reading actually, because we are looking at sleep deprivation. Cause some interesting stuff can happen if you stay up for long enough. The hypnagogic state can be very powerful in the right circumstances. You might think in ways you don't normally think, you might hear things sometimes a little bit, and it feels like it's kinda in your head, but what if it's not? Was that in your head? And on rare occasions, you can even see Spider-Man, apparently. This first story we're looking at is called I Saw the Spiderman, a sleep deprivation trip report uploaded to airwood.org on March 15th, 2006, by City Hunter. My experience with sleep deprivation took place about 7 years ago. I was working as a night watchman at a hotel, and for some strange reason, I decided to help out a friend who was going out of town for a few days and mind his store during the day. For 5 days, I worked at the hotel from 2 p.m. to 8 a.m. and at my friend's store from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., so I was working 21 hours a day. I drank coffee and smoked cigarettes all the time and dozed off maybe 10 minutes once in a while. The last night I was working was the worst. I started hallucinating. I was walking around to see if everything was okay, and I saw the Spider-Man running across the hall, red and blue costume and everything. I followed him to investigate, but there was nobody there. Later that night, I thought there was a party going on in the kitchen. I heard party noises. The damn cooks are drunk again, I thought, and stormed in there to stop the party. But there was nobody there, and the lights were off and everything. When I finished the morning after, I had to drive 20 kilometers across Icelandic country roads. I thought I was dying and I would never make it home, but I did, luckily, and then I slept for 20 hours and woke up with a hangover. My friends didn't believe me when I told them I had seen the Spider-Man. I probably could have died from sleep deprivation or fallen asleep at the wheel. The experience was uncomfortable and dangerous. Full-formed spectral apparition. A sleep deprivation trip report uploaded to airwood.org on November 27, 2002 by Zonker. In 2000, I left my home to go to massage school in Florida. Just before I left, I had asked my therapist of 5 years what exactly was wrong with me. Though diagnosed schizophrenic at 18, he answered, "We don't know, but we're pretty sure something. Keep taking the meds." I was disgusted. I'd taken Risperdal at various dosages for 5 years. For the uninitiated, Risperdal is an antipsychotic that can suppress sexual response. I can become erect with no orgasm. Not even shooting blanks, just sex that goes on too long with no orgasm, period. For the next couple of months, I took myself to lower and lower doses. 4 months later, I had dropped 20 pounds and felt more alive than ever. For 5 years, I'd slept continuously, sometimes 12 hours a day on school days. On vacation, I would sleep for sometimes 17 hours at a time. But now I stayed up all night twice a week, and I didn't catch up on the sleep. I drink coffee and go to class with no sleep. I take people to Payne's Prairie to watch the sunrise. I take people back to my place to meditate, and when they left, I'd surf the web until dawn. The event that put a stop to all of this was profound. I stayed up for almost 72 hours straight. Near the end, I was sitting in class on a cushion in a ring of cushions, normal massage lecture arrangement. The professors were all older, mature hippies, so we all sat barefoot on the floor in class. My eyes kept dropping closed, but after months of little sleep, I felt like pushing through to 72 hours so I could say I'd done it. I opened my eyes one more time and saw the teaching aide sitting near me, a curious expression on her face as she looked in my face. Another second passed, and her entire form squiggled and dissolved. Only her cushion remained. I realized I had seen a hallucination, a full-formed spectral apparition, if you will. After that, I excused myself to another classroom and passed out on the couch. My sleep patterns have never recovered. In fact, I haven't slept regularly since I started taking LSD in high school. Interesting sensations. A sleep deprivation trip report uploaded to airwood.org on September 21st, 2010, by Wolfie. This is an experience that happened to me during university due to sleep deprivation. I wasn't extremely deprived of sleep, but it was enough to have produced some peculiar effects. On a Thursday night, we all went out to this club. I had class at 8 a.m. the next day, but decided to go anyway. I should note that I only had 3 drinks this night, so I don't think alcohol had any significant effect. I danced a lot that night and was very exhausted at the end of it. However, upon returning home, I did not go to sleep until about 5:30 a.m. and woke up only a few hours later to go to class. So the day went by as normal, aside from being tired. But then that night, I was working on a project until about 3:30 a.m. when I finally decided to go to bed. Shortly after laying down in bed and closing my eyes, I began experiencing some strange sensations. The first thing I noticed was like an external pressure on my chest from some unknown object. Not painful, just slight pressure, as if there was some object there. I then began to notice in my fingertips a sensation like they were wiggling around even though I was not moving them. And then the most interesting part, I began to feel like there was a girl on the bed with me, rubbing up against me and so on. I could feel her when her body touched mine, and when she moved around I could sense where she was even when she was not touching me. The feeling of her presence was so convincing that I actually opened my eyes to check at one point. There was one point where she whispered in my ear and I had an auditory hallucination. I don't recall what she said. I don't think it was words so much as just sounds, but I definitely heard it. I was awake this whole time, but with my eyes closed. It was a pretty interesting experience and really quite nice. And what surprises me is it took relatively little sleep deprivation to bring this on. And finally, led to Looney Bin. A sleep deprivation trip report posted to Arrowwood.org on May 9th, 2006 by Moriah. I had a lot of stress and a lot of drama going on in my life at the time and wasn't sleeping well. I have issues with insomnia. Due to events in my own insomnia, I stayed up about 60 hours with maybe 4 hours of sleep in that time. I worked 3 days out of my 4 that week without too many problems, but I did notice myself losing concentration as things went by. If I'd been smart, I would have called in sick that 4th day and made myself sleep, but I had some attendance issues at that job and my boss was not happy with me. I went to work on the 4th day, promising myself that if I could make it through, I would have 3 days to sleep, and fighting to get through the day. By that evening, I was shaky, emotionally labile, and told a coworker that I felt like I was having a nervous breakdown. When I looked in the mirror that evening, I noticed my pupils were hugely dilated, as though I had indulged in speed. I hadn't. At this point, I was very irrational, and when I had a message on my machine saying a friend needed me to go write his resume for him, I went, even though I had promised myself sleep. I couldn't sleep over there either. The next day there was some drama, and I ended up being very paranoid and distrustful of people. This is where things started getting really kooky. While I was driving them somewhere, one of them talked about paranormal powers and said he was able to communicate with the dead. My grandfather died when I was 11, and I loved him dearly, and so I asked my friend if he could try to talk to him. He said he had contact, and that there was a nickname he always called me. He said Pumpkin. Yes, that's a very standard nickname for a granddaughter. However, my grandfather called me Pumpkinhead due to my red hair. It was enough to convince me that my grandfather was able to talk to us from beyond. At that point, I heard a voice that I interpreted as my grandfather's, saying, "Your grandmother is having a stroke." Without telling my friends what I had heard and why I was doing this, I found the nearest payphone, called 911, and had an ambulance sent to my grandmother's house, where my mom also lived. Then I called to the house, told them that an ambulance was on the way, and that I would be there shortly because Granny was having a stroke. Mom said I was crazy. I told her that if she believed that, to keep the ambulance there, and I was going to be there shortly. Thinking back, we see this as a cry for help. I got back to my grandmother's house, and she appeared fine. They had sent the ambulance on their way. However, I was convinced that she was going to die that day, and so I was determined to stay up until my mom went to work that morning. I also went over and talked to a neighbor who was a friend, who tried to get me to drink some Jack Daniels and take some Benadryl to get some sleep. I slept about 4 hours. It felt somewhat more clear, but I was still delusional. I went to her house, and she was fine. However, I obviously wasn't. Somehow my brain had decided that one of the friends with me when I heard the voice was the Antichrist, because his initials were CJ. Get it? JC, CJ, punny. Very punny. Granny had me lay down, and I heard the marching band from the school nearby playing, but to me it sounded like troops marching in. I couldn't sleep. My mom came home, I went to talk to her, and they were watching the news, weather segment on TV. When I saw the TV, it seemed like it was talking about what I thought was going on outside. In psychiatric terms, this is referred to as a delusion of reference, thinking things that have nothing to do with you are directed at you. I went back to my apartment. Some of my friends were very concerned about me and came to see me. One even offered to sleep next to me and hold me if I would just go to sleep. I tried, but I really couldn't. My mind was racing, seeing connections and correlations and events that weren't really there. Things get very fuzzy around this time. I remember seeing my neighbor in my apartment telling me I had to get my act together, but he says he never came over and said that. That day, my mom came to my apartment, and I apparently had sat in the bathtub full of cold water for over 3 hours when she got there. I was babbling, making no sense. She called 911. When I realized she was calling the ambulance, I knew I needed to give her my folder of papers. I had a durable power of attorney for healthcare, naming her as the healthcare proxy. However, I couldn't quite get the words out to say it, or make any sense, and I ended up just pointing at the folder like it was significant. She told me later that she had no idea why I was doing so until she opened the folder and saw the paper. The ambulance came and asked me what hospital I wanted to go to. At this point I was very paranoid and didn't want to talk. I named the hospital my mom used to work at. When I got into the ER, I decided I did not want to talk at all. I did not cooperate as they tried to draw blood, but did not fight them either. After the blood was drawn, an evaluation was made, and they were ready to move me from the room. I used passive resistance, went limp. In a way, it helped my family for me to do so. They hadn't been in the exam room and assumed that the doctors had popped me with a shot to put me out. I heard something over the intercom that sounded like my last name telling me to go smoke. The intercom had went off, but it said, "Front unit patients, it's time to smoke." Since I thought it was talking about me, delusion of reference again, and all I wanted was to get out of here, I thought that maybe I could step outside with the smokers. I don't smoke, but their smoking area was inside. Since I showed up, someone noticed I didn't have a cigarette. They handed me one, and the nurse lit it. I inhaled, coughed, and puked all over the floor. Then went back to my room. They gave me a Phenergan shot, an anti-nausea medicine that makes a person very sleepy. I was better after having slept, but the next day it still felt like the TV in the dining room, put on a religious channel, was talking about me. However, the doctors were giving me Haldol as well, and the next day I started experiencing extrapyramidal symptoms indicative of too much of a neuroleptic. They gave me a shot to stop the symptoms and decided to just treat me with Restoril, a sleeping pill, for 3 days. That did the trick. I was back to normal. They kept me a few more days for observation. In the end, I left the hospital with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, because they assumed I had to have been in a manic episode. However, none of the preventative medicines they had me on did what they were supposed to do. In a bipolar person, those meds even them out. They made me profoundly depressed, caused severe weight gain, and I turned out to be allergic to 2 of them. I stopped taking meds and haven't had anything like that happen again, nor have I had any depression. I've spoken to several psychiatrists who say that the bipolar diagnosis was likely wrong and that what I experienced was simply sleep deprivation psychosis. After that experience, I refused to stay up more than 24 hours without at least 6 hours of sleep. It's not a fun experience. I'm still paying off the hospital bill. While I do think I gained insight into the psychotic process, it was paid at way too high of a price. Commentary time. Yeah, psychosis is a real thing. That can happen. A lot of different things can cause it. I genuinely don't know what advice to give here because, I don't know, some people, they eat 3 molecules of LSD and they start believing the trees are trying to kill them. Or maybe you can pop 4 tabs, no problem, and still remain rational. We're all different. I don't know if psychosis is, something that is latent? Fuck, I always forget that one. I don't know if psychosis is something that is just, waiting to come out of any of us, given the right or wrong circumstances, or if it's only in certain people, but, you'll never really know if you're one of those people until it happens to you. If you have, a family history of schizophrenia and some shit like that, you might want to be a little bit more careful around this stuff. I thought that one report was interesting, the part where they felt like there was a presence on their chest, because that is, verbatim, the classic sleep paralysis sensation. That's that one painting of the demon that's on that one person's chest, you know what I'm talking about? That little guy. I've experienced quite a few sleep paralysis episodes. I wonder if there's a sleep paralysis trip report section. Hang on a second. Sleep paralysis does not seem to have its own dedicated category. Damn. I have had some weird hypnagogic experiences. For one, there's the sleep paralysis. I remember at one point I was on my side in bed. I couldn't move, and behind me, so off to the side of my bed because I was on my side, there was just a woman screaming or something, in pain. And I don't think I was scared because I knew what it was. I was like, huh. Well, that's I had this one moment. Let me set the stage. I'm in my bed. It's who the hell knows in the morning. No lights are on. All I can see is the Eigengrau gray of the dark room illuminated vaguely by street and starlight. When my mom enters the room, stands in front of my bed, I know I'm having sleep paralysis because I can't move. And she is like just smiling at me in the creepiest fucking way. And I know that the instant I feel a shred of fear, she is going to lunge at me. I felt a shred of fear. She lunged at me. I snapped out of it. I don't know what look, there's some things I just don't read into. I don't know why the fuck. Like, my mom and I get along pretty good, okay? I'm not, like, afraid of her. I don't know what that was about. I think my brain just generated the image of her walking in, and because I knew I was in sleep paralysis, I was on edge, and because I was on edge, that led to the nightmare. I don't know. There's another one, and this was the weirdest one for me. It might have even been that same incident, like right before it happened there. Or no, maybe it was a different one. I don't remember, but I was like half awake, like either coming out of a dream or just like in a hypnagogic state where I was under the impression that I was face down in my bed. This was not actually the case. I learned that I was actually face up because I don't sleep on my face. I sleep on my back usually, or my side. And you may think to yourself, okay, well, whoop-de-doo, you thought you were one side down, then you realize you're the other side up. But the thing is, I felt the transition from my assumption about my proprioception to the reality of my proprioception, and it took like a couple seconds. So what I essentially experienced was I didn't get rotated, like my body didn't flip like by rotating. It was like basically if you look at your screen, it wasn't, I didn't rotate like this. It's like I think I'm down here like this, and then I feel like from like you map each of my atoms from down here to the theoretical up here of the actual position I'm in, and you just like slide them straight through. Does that make any sense? Like I felt myself getting mirrored like that. Like that. So that was a very unique sensation that I cannot describe. And I don't think I just had anything to do with actual sleep deprivation, but it's like the same sort of state, I think. They call it hypnagogia. I keep saying that. And I keep saying that because that's what they call it. So I also call it that. I'm them. I'm they. It's me. Anyway, yeah, don't stay up all night and drive, by the way. That's like actually worse. It depends on how drunk you are, but generally speaking, driving tired can often be worse than driving drunk. If you really want to trip off of sleep deprivation, I mean, it's probably not healthy, and if you're unlucky, it could lead to psychosis, I guess. If you really wanna, I guess treat it like an actual trip, you know? Don't have any responsibilities, because you're going to be much worse than you normally are at doing basically everything. Alternatively, you could take drugs, but who would ever do such a thing? I was trying to think of how to transition what I just said into an outro, but I don't remember what I just said, so here's the outro. Goodbye.